It was in July this year that the Adopt a School Foundation launched a COVID-19 campaign that called on corporate South Africa to essentially partner with them and donate towards the rebuilding of schools. That campaign is seeking to improve the conditions at local schools as far as things like sanitation, digitization, infrastructure and food security are concerned. Our very own Mrs. Shudufhadzo Musida has added her voice to this campaign. She joins us now in studio, looking as lovely as ever. Joining us via our Zoom line is also Ethel Sekgethelo, who is the events manager of Adopt a School. To both our guests, both present in person and virtually, thanks very much for making time, and it's great to have you on the program. Shudufhadzo, this is adding to the long list of the great works that you are doing in this country, dare I say. Why join this particular campaign?
I'm very passionate about education, and I'm very passionate about food security. And as someone that comes from a village where the schools that they're trying to refurbish are exactly like that, it was quite important for me to join and lend my voice to this campaign, because it's very, very important in terms of the educational empowerment of our children and the schools.
Yeah. I mean, do you get the sense that there are enough people caring about the conditions of our school? And by that I mean even the individuals who aren't parents of school-going children?
No, in all honesty, I think we can all do more. There's so much more that we can do, because if the conditions of these schools have been the same way for the past how many years, it's time for us to stand up and say, you know what, it's time for a change. So this is the importance of this campaign, because it speaks for the refurbishment and the rebuilding of schools, because that is what is necessary in many parts of South Africa. Sanitation, digitization, infrastructure and food security are things that are very, very important and essential in the educational development of children.
Absolutely. Ethel, I wonder if I can bring you into this conversation. Thanks for also speaking to us. I mean, typically you would expect, for instance, communities to be at the forefront of protecting the schools where they operate. But sadly, government even would be the first to say that they're not finding that. Help us understand then how a campaign like this would at least help people feel that they can own the schools that they're trying to rebuild.
Thank you, Ayanda. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a campaign that, you know, as Shudu has mentioned now, that it's very critical in sort of addressing the critical gaps that are in these schools that impede teaching and learning in these schools. So obviously we do need the communities and the partners, which the government, the Department of Education is one of the partners that works with us as well in making sure that we do these campaigns. So, I mean, the COVID relief-19 interventions that we put together is very critical in closing these gaps, which includes things like providing sanitation, the digitalizations of classrooms, the provision of infrastructure and food security, which are very critical in creating a safe schooling environment, which is conducive, which I mentioned, to teaching and learning. So, yeah, I mean, we are calling on to corporates to come and sort of join us on this campaign and donate towards these interventions that are really, really needed in our schools.
Yeah. How far has the campaign gone in actually successfully getting some of these corporates on board?
You know, so far, we have managed to raise about 5 million rands since last year. So it was initially a call that we made to our internal list of donors last year. But then this year we then said, let's call the broader corporate. Let's take it online. Let's create more awareness around it and create sort of like an extensive menu that corporates and individuals can sort of work with us and join us and donate towards. So far we have about 8 schools that have benefited from the campaign, where we have done infrastructure, we've provided infrastructural relief, we've provided some proper sanitation, which is something that we found that is a challenge in these schools as well, where we've also just managed to do food security as Shudi has mentioned. But I mean, the work is still there. There's more to do. There's more schools to impact, to intervene in. So we still are calling on our corporate partners and individuals to join us in this campaign.
Yeah, without a doubt. Let's bring you back into the discussion. I mean, there's no point, for instance, in having the schools there, the actual building lie empty when the pupils who are there also not taken care of. that segues also quite well into the book that you've just written, right? Which is aiming essentially at ensuring that we're not only taking care of the infrastructure, but also of the individuals who use these buildings.
Yes. The big thing about everything that's been mentioned by Ethel and the work that is being done by Adopt a School is that we're trying to create, or they're trying to create, an environment that is conducive for students to learn. This plays a big role in mental health as well, which is why this book was written, where it's quite important for us, in as much as we can empower our students with the infrastructure and everything else, but to also empower their minds, because the mind is the powerhouse. If you look at their surroundings currently, without the infrastructure that is there. I mean, so many schools, you find that children are discouraged. And if we tackle the mind, if we empower their minds through mental health education being integrated into the education curriculum, then we're going to go a long way in terms of also just improving the education that they get and how they absorb the information that they get in schools.
Issues around mental health have been a big driving point of your reign since you began. And I'll be frank in saying that I've never heard mental health being spoken about by Amos South Africa until you came around. I mean, are you getting a sense that it is being picked up in the ways that you had hoped?
Yes. I went to visit different schools last week, and I was speaking to 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, and even 14-year-olds. I spoke to them about mental health, and you'd be very surprised to see how much information that they've been getting from the online platforms, but also from the book. I read the book to the children, and when I did, I asked them so many questions relating to mental health. But once we find the right languaging and we start bringing the conversations into our schools, our communities, our homes, it becomes a conversation that is normalized, where children can also say, listen, sometimes I don't always feel okay. If they're being hurt, if they're being bullied, those are the conversations that they can have, because it's not swept under the rug. And in many areas, a lot of these issues are occurring, but we don't address them because the issues of mental health are not normalized. So when I started this conversation, the Mindful Movement, we started with Mindful Mondays, where we discuss it, when we discuss mental health issues with various experts. And we found that we are targeting young adults and adults. So when we got to the book, it was targeting children, because in order to destigmatize mental health, we need to start from the ground up, and that starts with children.
Absolutely. The book itself is quite interesting. I mean, it's called Shudu Finds Her Magic, and essentially it's following this young girl who moves because parents got a job opportunity. I think it's in Mpumalanga. How much of it is actually autobiographical?
All of it. All of it. So from the start to the end, all of it is absolutely autobiographical, and it's my life story. But obviously when I get a lot of questions from children, is this the true story? And yes, it is, because most of the time we never really have real-life fairy tales of sorts. I mean, growing up, we've always had different kinds of representation, but now here is a representation or a book or a person that you can see, and you can see the results of what mental health education and just the power of friendship and love and just having their voices heard, having my voice heard. It did a lot for me and actually changed the narrative of my life.
Sure. I understand, Ethel, why someone like Shudu joining this campaign is a great benefit to you. You'll speak to us about that without a doubt. But I'm also wondering, where is this campaign targeted the most? In other words, are there specific regions in this country that stand to benefit the most by this campaign, or are you finding generally there's a need across South Africa?
So, Ayanda, we work across South Africa in all of the schools in these disadvantaged communities. So this campaign is not targeted to a specific province or specific school. It is targeted to all the schools that we work in across the country. But obviously currently right now, one of the schools that has started benefiting from that is Kobushiana Primary School in Soweto. But that's not to say that, the more funds come in, the more interventions we want to do in the schools that need them the most across the country. So it is not specific to any area, but we're looking at sort of intervening in our schools across the country,
Yeah, and I imagine that intervention in some respects has to be a sustainable one. I mean, it's one thing, for instance, to get into a community, help them get up, but it's another ensuring that they stay on their feet.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the model that we work with is called full school development, which does exactly that. It's a holistic model which aims at improving the academic, infrastructural, social, and security environment in the schools. We talk about sustainability all the time. We don't want to go into the schools where we do not holistically sort of get a school from disadvantaged to a healthy school. So our aim and what we want to do, what we want to improve, is make sure that once we go into the school, we holistically look at the needs of that school and intervene correctly and appropriately. So yes, sustainability is very important to the foundation.
Yeah, so with that holistic approach in mind, where do you find typically a lot of these kind of campaigns would miss the mark, so to speak? Let me phrase that differently. A lot of people think it starts and ends, for instance, with just giving money to certain institutions. But there are other needs that exist there as well. Typically, what are the needs that people forget?
I mean, yes, absolutely, you're all right. It's not where you go in and just put a bandage over. It's something that you find that you have to get the corporates to commit to a longer time, which means that, as I mentioned, that the whole school development model aims at not just looking at the infrastructure. We don't just go to schools and then just build a school and say, okay, we are done, we are out. We also look at the resourcing of that infrastructure that we do. We also look at capacitating the teachers and the SGB and the SMT to be able to work in those infrastructures that we've given them, to be able to resource it. So we bring in whatever is required to make sure that that structure is functional. But not only that, there's learners, and as Shudu mentioned, food security is important. We go in and intervene and find out how do we then make sure that the learners that are in these schools are able to actually learn. You can't learn when you're hungry. So that is an intervention that we are very passionate about, that we do as well. And as Shudu mentioned, mental health is important. So psychosocial support is very important, where we have our social welfare team that goes in there and assesses what the learner's mental capacity, what are they dealing with at home, what are they dealing with at schools, what are their fears, what are the challenges that they're facing. So it really is a holistic view that we take as a foundation. It's meant to be sustainable. Like I said, we do not want to go into a school and sort of put together and build an infrastructure and leave without the people, without the teachers and learners being able to use that resources to the maximum that it's supposed to be used at.
Yeah, without a doubt. Shudu, I'll be honest with you. What I find sometimes very disheartening is that a lot of, for instance, the vandalism that takes place at schools is actually from the inside. You know, it's sometimes pupils who, for whatever reason, aren't connecting with the infrastructure itself and are drawing on the walls. Sometimes it's community members who know where the security weaknesses of the school actually are, taking advantage of that. How do we shift the dial insofar as that is concerned? Because once again, we could start all the campaigns in the world. It doesn't really help if we build a school and in a few months later the community itself don't take care of it.
I think it also goes back to mental health, empowering the minds, because with the vandalism and the destruction of property, that is a projection of what is happening around the community. It's almost like when a child bullies another child, usually people think we should focus on the child that's being bullied, but you also focus on the bully as well, because that is a reflection of the person that is bullying the other person. So with vandalism as well and destruction of property, it's a reflection of what is happening in the community. So it's about empowering the community and their minds to realize that this is their new reality. I mean, when a doctor school comes in and they fix a school, it's about letting them know that this is their property. You know, it's not just us coming in and trying to take over. So it's important that in all these initiatives that the communities are also involved. They're also part of the process, so they can understand that this is their property, not just the property that is outside of them or separate to them. So that comes with empowering their minds, empowering them as well to be part of the projects that are being done on the ground. We can't just go into any community and just start building without the community being involved. That's where we get the disconnect.
Absolutely. Well, one can only wish you all the best of luck. Thanks very much indeed for sharing not only your story, but your reasons behind joining this important initiative. That, of course, is Miss South Africa, Shudufhadzo Musida. Joining us via our video link via Zoom there is Ethel Sekgethelo, who's the Adopt a Schools events manager. To both of you, once again, thanks for coming through. Thank you indeed for your time.